So I first want you to notice that this is from Isaiah chapter 56. And chapter 56 is from the third part of Isaiah. We've already talked about the first part of Isaiah probably belonging to Isaiah, and the second part of Isaiah called Deutero-Isaiah, in which someone, I'll say, takes over the speaking of Isaiah, but it isn't Isaiah himself. It is someone who knows the mind and spirit and heart and theology of Isaiah. But chapter 56 begins part 3 of Isaiah, called Trito-Isaiah. Isaiah is quoted, but doesn't do first person speaking in this particular, from this last part of the book of Isaiah. Observe what is right and do what is just. This rightness and justice are big themes of Isaiah. But here's the difference in this last part of the book. In the first part of the book of Isaiah and Deutero-Isaiah, which is the middle part, the focus there was on God's power to do what is right and just. But look at the imperative that's used here, the imperative mood. Observe, in other words, you guys, observe what is right, and you guys do what is just. The doing what is right and doing what is just is being put on the people, on their enterprise, instead of on God's power. So there's a definite shift that the way you saw God acting with you, now you take it in and move ahead with it. But this is on you now. Okay, and then in the next, like 3 lines down, where foreigners are mentioned right there, that Susan read. You need to know that Ezekiel, the fiery prophet that we talked about last week, Ezekiel objected to uncircumcised foreigners doing anything in or around the temple. He believed they had to be separated. But this is another shift, because what Isaiah is going to say is, I'm going to qualify what Ezekiel said. And if foreigners can keep the Sabbath free from profanation and hold to my covenant, then come on in, jump on this train. So look at how this Trito-Isaiah nuances what is being said. So in other words, see, foreigners is like an epithet. Oh, you foreigners, that always was for the Israelite people. But look at how Isaiah is softening it, nuancing it, so that people can change how they think and move more broadly into their future. So what Trito-Isaiah is saying, okay, look, what if foreigners love the name of the Lord, become his servants, keep the Sabbath free from profanation, don't profane it, hold to my covenant? Then look what he says, them I will bring to my holy mountain and make joyful in my house of prayer. All who keep the Sabbath free from profanation, that all is really important. All. So it's like it's qualified universalism. It's not, remember, the whole point of the chosenness of the Israelites was not for themselves. It was so that God could enter into the world through them and make the circle bigger. So with this last part of the book of the prophet Isaiah, the circle is going to get bigger, hopefully, by invitation. Okay, and then what I highlighted at the bottom, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. Okay, first of all, the designation of the temple as a house of prayer was the highest title of the temple. So that language is specific and important. And the reason I highlighted this last part is because this is what Jesus quoted when he was getting rid of the money changers in the temple. It was this quote from Isaiah. And then I want to back up just, them I will bring to my holy mountain. Them I will bring to my holy mountain and make joyful in the house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be acceptable on my altar. So you see what he's doing? and remember we talked about this, a red flag of evil is anything that is dividing. That's in fact what diabolos, devil, means. The hurling, literally hurling to the other side of the room. Diabolos. So look what God is doing. It's a gathering movement. All of these people that were on the other side of the wall, so to speak, literally in the case of the temple, them I'm bringing in. Look at the gathering. I'm making them happy in my house. It's gathering. They're being welcome. And their offerings and sacrifices will be acceptable. They will belong to the worship. So all of this is part of God's trying to break out more broadly in life by eliminating what separates, but also calling us. It's not a thoughtless thing. You are expected to be responsible and accountable in certain ways. And that absolutely is part of God's plan. But the tenor of this whole thing is very arms open, come in, you know, and joy is the tenor of this. And the reason this is going to be important and linked to the gospel is because we're talking in Isaiah here. We're talking about the foreigners, in other words, the outsiders, being invited in. And that same theme is going to be reflected in the gospel. So if we could move to the gospel, I'm going to skip the second reading. This is a hard one, isn't it? Nobody knows what to do with this. And I have read where like kind of extremes are gone to try to make sense of it. I think we just have to throw out what we think. Remember that prayer that we've talked about before? God help me to push away everything I thought I knew about this so that your truth can come in. And I think that's the kind of state of mind we're going to have. Okay, so first of all, Tyre and Sidon. This is a region of Phoenicia, which is the area, Tyre and Sidon, the cities were along that whole eastern stretch of the Mediterranean. Phoenicians were the sailors in the Mediterranean. So Phoenicia, the land, the country, the region called Phoenicia, hugged that eastern side of the Mediterranean Sea. It was next to Galilee. Tyre and Sidon were two of the many seaport villages there, and the people there were called Canaanites. That's why I underlined that for you. The woman was a Canaanite. That's an Old Testament word for the people who were, after the Egyptians, the biggest, I should say the first, after the Egyptians, and biggest enemies of the Israelite people. They believed they were wicked and godless, and in fact deserved nothing less than extermination from the face of the earth. So because of that mindset, the Israelite people, Jesus included, would never go into Canaanite territory. And while Mark softens this and calls this woman a Greek, Matthew is not having any softening. He's saying what she is, and he's also making clear another thing Mark doesn't do. Mark's kind of mushy in this pericope, in this story, because after you read Mark's version of this pericope, you're not exactly sure that Jesus didn't walk right into Phoenicia to talk to her. But Matthew, no. Matthew's very clear. The woman is a Canaanite, and Jesus isn't touching that soil of Phoenicia, because look what the second thing I highlighted. She came out of that district. So she steps onto Galilean soil. Right away, she calls Jesus Lord, which means that she believes in him. And then his disciples say what I highlighted, oh, send her away. Now what that means in Aramaic, in the Aramaic idiom, was do what she wants so we can get rid of her. You know, like if somebody was begging you for $5 and followed you into the store and said, please, $5, and you'd think, okay, here's $5, be gone, you know. That's how the disciples were, that's what send her away means in that idiom. In other words, let's be rid of her. And then what happens is what people don't know what to do with, because it's very unusual language recorded in the Gospels out of Jesus Christ's mouth. But what's happening here is a first century version of doing the dozens. And the point, so in other words, it's a riposte. It's playing back and forth, insulting back and forth. And you need to know this, that in the original Aramaic, it was far less harsh than what it sounds like to us in English, but it was not gentle. But this was peasant humor, I'll say. It was part of the give and take. So what I want you to reframe in your head is this. This is not about theology. This is about the peasant humor. What's important here is that the woman gets the last word, not Jesus. And that's highly unusual, certainly in Matthew's gospel and in the other gospels. So here goes this game. This game that in some neighborhoods we call doing the dozens, in others I don't know any other word except riposte, when you just kind of insult back and forth, but it's not always done without malice, but many times it's just part of playing around. So this back and forth, oh, no, I was only going to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, interesting that Jesus says that, because Jesus, as a Hebrew person, took very seriously the barriers between the Canaanites and the Israelites. So you have to know that. Jesus is coming out of a definite and particular mindset. And then the woman does him homage, says help, calls him Lord, says help. Then he goes, oh, no, it's not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs. Okay, and then if you go down a little bit. And then she says, now this is something that doesn't come out in the translation. She says, please, Lord, for even the dogs eat the scraps that fall from the table of their masters. Okay, that second word dogs there, please, Lord, for even the dogs, what that means is the family pet, not the curs that are running around the neighborhood, loose and wild and doing damage. So some people say, some interpreters will say, so this is what you have to understand. She was calling herself a beloved family pet to Jesus. And that kind of ameliorates, softens, the harshness of using even this terminology of dogs. And while that's true, the original word in Aramaic is the pet dog. That's not the point of this. Remember, this is about peasant interaction, not about theology. It is about faith. It is about the woman doing the only thing that really matters, which is cleaving to Jesus Christ. And so Jesus finally acknowledges she wins the game. A woman, he says, and I highlighted, great is your faith. Now, Jesus will never refuse faith where he found it, ever. And that is also true here. So, faith. Sometimes the sheer persistence, which certainly this lady was as they were in this game of back and forth, sometimes the sheer persistence is the prayer. And it is your good work of faith. And it is the spiritual discipline that makes you a person of faith. Faith is persistent by its very nature. And persistence is single-mindedness. And single-mindedness will get us the end we seek. So she says, it's time, okay? So let me give a few thoughts on this. The thing I want you to walk away from, though, is that this is not about theology. The interest is not so much in the miracle, which, by the way, she gets. And she walks away believing her daughter was healed with no proof. You get that? She walked away. She had no idea. Nobody came from her daughter's house saying, oh, she's well, she's well. Her faith was so great that she believed if Jesus said it, it would happen. I want you to remember that. I want you to remember that her faith is the heart of this story, more than this language game they were playing, far more than any theology you would like to impute to this or, stick into this. The point is the faith. The point isn't even the miracle. The point is the faith. Now, Matthew wrote for Gentile Jewish Christians. So this story would have had great importance for Matthew's audience, because Matthew is writing for the Israelite community who knows and has heard about Jesus and is considering being baptized into the way that the first church was called. That's different from Mark. And so that's why this whole story, everything that was in that story is important for Matthew's point. That's very, very, very important. Because what Jesus' point is there, that faith is the only thing ultimately that's going to stand between the Gentiles and the Jews. In this case, between the Canaanites and the Israelites. It's faith that you can choose to embrace. So when you hear this on Sunday, what I want you to hold on to is enjoy. Jesus loved this game, this back and forth. Remember that it's a game. Remember that it's about faith and not theology. Remember that it's about this gathering movement. You can see the parallelism. If Isaiah is talking about inviting more people into this temple, then the gospel is about the same thing, gathering the movement, because what's important is that God be praised and people be served, and we love and live in the truth of God. And that does not belong to a subsection of people. So that's the parallelism between the two.